Hello and welcome to this section on punctuation. I suppose a good question would be, well, what is punctuation? So let's look to Wikipedia for a good definition. Wikipedia tells us it is the practice, action or system of inserting points or other small marks into texts in order to aid interpretation, division of text into sentences, clauses, etc. by means of such marks. Well, okay, that's great as a description, but in practice, it really means helping us to interpret text properly by telling us which parts belong together, when parts end and new parts begin, and so on. And this section is structured in the following way. So the first few lessons are on things that come at the end of a sentence. So they will be full stops, exclamation marks and question marks, and we have a lesson on quotation marks, and following that we have punctuation marks that are used for pauses and breaks, and that is in commas, semicolons and colons. And in this block we also take a look at the Oxford comma, or the so-called Oxford comma. And the next group we have are things like connectors and dividers. So they would include hyphens, dashes, slashes and apostrophes. And the last sort of serious lesson is on brackets and all the different types of brackets we have and how we use those. Now, as a reward for getting through all that punctuation, the very last lesson is a fun lesson, and it can show you sort of what happens if you get the punctuation wrong. So we'll take several sentences and punctuate them differently and show you how they can have wildly different meanings from the same sequence of words. All we've changed is maybe the placement of a comma. And that's your reward as a fun lesson at the end of this section. I hope you enjoy it. This lesson is on the full stop. The full stop is also called a period in American English, and it appears as a single dot at the bottom of the line after the last word, as we see here. It is used at the end of a sentence that is neither a question nor an exclamation. It's also used in abbreviations, titles, initials, and acronyms. It's also used in decimal numbers. And with quoting with the full stop, there are actually differences between the way UK and US English treat them. And full stop examples in abbreviations. So common words such as days, months, address parts are often abbreviated. And the abbreviation is only in the written form. We still speak it the same. So the appointment is for Monday afternoon. And Monday has been abbreviated to MON and therefore has a dot after it. My address is 23 North Street, Plymouth. And street, being a common address part, has been abbreviated to ST. Her birthday is on the 23rd of February. And February is the month. It has been abbreviated to Feb. We are open between 9 AM and 6 PM, where AM stands for ante-meridium and PM stands for post-meridium. And meridium means noon or 12 o'clock, so AM is in the morning and PM is in the afternoon. And you'll notice that if the abbreviated word is the last word of the sentence, one full stop is enough. We don't need one for the abbreviation and then one for the end of the sentence. One is plenty. Titles are a specific form of abbreviation. So DR dot, MR dot, and MRS dot are actually abbreviations of Doctor, Mr. and Mistress, although the MRS you'll often hear as Mrs. as well. And they're so common that in UK English the full stop is usually omitted. and in US English, they're still used. In the UK, we'd write Dr. Brown will see you now without a dot after the DR, and the US version of Dr. Brown will see you now has a dot after the abbreviation of doctor. Initials are used instead of the full name and are therefore abbreviations, and because they're abbreviations, they have a full stop to show this. As in, my name is Derek J. Smith, where the J stands for John, and please note there is a space after the full stop. And if there are several consecutive initials, then you have several options. George R.R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones, where we have R. blank, R. blank. Or we can bunch the initials up together, right? George R.R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones as in R. with no blank between the two R's. Or we can compact it even further and just miss out the dots altogether and write George R.R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones. And in each case, it doesn't change the way we say it, it only changes the way we write it. And if you're at all uncertain about which version to use, if you're working for a company, they may have a style guide you can use. But no matter what version you use, the most important thing is to be consistent and use the same version throughout the document. Slightly different version of this is acronyms, which use the first word of a phrase and are usually spoken as its own word. And most acronyms are written in uppercase without full stops between them. But some acronyms are so common, they're written in lowercase, and it's almost like a new word. NASA is sending a new probe to outer space. He needs that report ASAP, or you'll sometimes hear, he needs that report ASAP, where ASAP stands for as soon as possible. Please use this laser pointer. Now, laser is an acronym. It stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation. Most people overlook this and just use laser as a normal word. Similar scuba. I bought some new scuba gear, where scuba actually stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. But most people just use scuba to describe diving gear. He says he saw a UFO last night, and UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. In this version, we've chosen to show it with dots after the letters in uppercase. You can also just use UFO without the dots. An ellipsis is 3 dots together, like this. And it's used to indicate a continuation, and usually the reader provides the rest themselves. I told him, it's your round. ... So what you provide is, and he got up and got it. We're on holiday, we should do something, which invites the person he's talking to fill the dots in and provide a suggestion for what we could do. Tomorrow is Saturday, no work. Again, the invitation is there to fill in the dots with a suggestion of what we can do tomorrow when we have time off. And full stops also used in decimal numbers, and the full stop separates the whole number part from the decimal number part. And in this particular case, we don't call it a full stop, we say point, and we'll see in the examples. So 1.5 plus 3.2 equals 4.7. And someone could check this if they want to. Now here we have a currency value which is slightly different again, and we could say the grocery bill was $37.23, but that would sound a bit weird, and people would normally say the grocery bill was $37.23. Or in a pound version, that will be £167.48, please. And when we're quoting what people have said, there's a slight difference between the way it's handled in UK and US English. In the UK version, the full stop goes outside the quote, and in the US version, the full stop goes inside the quote. So the UK would have, the doctor said, "I have good news for you," and the full stop is outside of the quote at the end of the sentence. And the US version would have, the doctor said, "I have good news for you," would put the full stop inside the quote, as they would say it belongs to the sentence that the doctor said. A little quick one for you to have a look at. I told my boss I need time off over Christmas. So if we look at it, the full stop is outside of the quote, so it must be the UK version. I'm sure you got that right, so well done. This lesson is on the exclamation mark. The exclamation mark is sometimes also called an exclamation point. It is used to indicate a strong emotion, i.e. anger or excitement. It replaces a full stop at the end of an exclamatory sentence, unless the last word is an abbreviation. We'll see examples of these. And it adds urgency to imperative sentences. It is used to add emphasis to individual words or phrases, and it can be combined with other exclamation and question marks. It can also be used to indicate sarcasm or irony. And you need to be careful when formatting titles with exclamation marks. Now, for strong emotions, these are used to indicate anger or excitement. Yuck! Liver and spinach for dinner again. And this sort of yuck has an exclamation mark to really sort of emphasize the yuck. Woohoo! Holiday starts tomorrow! And after the woohoo, we have an exclamation mark. And after holiday starts tomorrow, another exclamation mark, because they're both showing excitement. You passed all your exams. Well done! And again, excitement. Well done. You passed your exams. Exclamation marks to show this. Exclamation marks replace a full stop at the end of an exclamatory sentence, unless the last word is an abbreviation. So to show, again, amazement, you could just say, "I'm amazed you know him," full stop. But here it's, "I'm amazed that you know him." Exclamation mark emphasizes the amazement. Or in this case, him being a well-known actor, Robert Downey Jr., "I'm amazed that you know Robert Downey Jr." Now, because the junior, the JR dot, is an abbreviation, we have the dot and the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. Or, "My operation is scheduled for 4 a.m. Again, exclamation mark, like to emphasize the earliness of it. They also add urgency to imperative sentences. Let's have a look at some examples. I need the report by Friday. A normal sentence with a full stop at the end. Or, I need the report by Friday. Now the exclamation mark really emphasizes it. I really need it by Friday. Makes it stronger. Or if someone says, you need to calm down, without the exclamation mark, or you need to calm down. It really kind of makes it a stronger expression. And you also use it to add emphasis to individual words or phrases. And when we do this, we normally put the exclamation mark in brackets after the word or phrase that we want to emphasize. And this is only in informal writing. With formal writing, you wouldn't do this. So if we look at this example and pretended that the exclamation mark wasn't there, we'd just say, we worked really late. It was midnight before we left. And it's a fairly neutral statement. But saying it as it's written, say, we worked really late. It was midnight before we left. And the exclamation mark kind of emphasizes the midnight. Or, she has had 5 husbands and still hasn't found the right one. But with the exclamation mark, she's had 5 husbands and still hasn't found the right one. So this emphasizes the 5. That's quite a high number for husbands. Or for motorbikes, he really likes motorbikes. He has 10 in his garage. So 10's quite a lot to have, especially when you can only ride one at a time. Or we use them in combination with other exclamation marks and question marks. And again, this is only informal writing. Don't use this in formal writing. Leave me alone, with a big row of exclamation marks, emphasizing the fact that he wants to be left alone. You can also use it with exclamation marks, as shown here. She said, what? And it really emphasizes like the astonishment of what this person has said. Or, oh my God, who does he think he is? So we see both here. And we can use it for sarcasm. Now, the context and the tone of voice will tell us whether the person is being sarcastic or genuine. So if this was a genuine statement, someone would say, oh, you're so clever. But if it's a sarcastic, they say, oh, you're so clever. And usually have eye rolls and shaking of head to emphasize the point. Or she looked positively radiant would be the nice way, but if she looked a real mess, you might say, oh, she looked positively radiant. And this one probably hasn't got a serious version. You failed your driving test again. Genius. So you can use exclamation marks to indicate sarcasm and irony. Now we need to be a little bit careful when formatting titles with exclamation marks. So titles of things like books and films are often italicized to show this. And italicized has been italicized so you can see what it means. So if the name of the book or film includes an exclamation mark, then this would also get italicized. But if the name is not with an exclamation mark, then the exclamation mark is normal. So for instance, how many times have you seen Mamma Mia this month? And the film title Mamma Mia has an exclamation mark in it and therefore belongs to the title. So as you can see here, the Mamma Mia with the exclamation mark is all in italics. Or we have a film like Groundhog Day, which doesn't have an exclamation mark. And if somebody says, I really liked watching Groundhog Day, the exclamation mark is not italicized in this example. This lesson is all about the question mark. Question mark replaces a full stop at the end of a question, unless the last word is an abbreviation. It's also used with tag questions, but it's not used with indirect questions. It can be combined with other exclamation and question marks for emphasis, and you need to be careful when formatting titles with question marks. Question marks replace a full stop at the end of an interrogative sentence, unless the last word is an abbreviation. For example, when was your holiday this year? What would you like to eat this evening? So instead of a full stop, we have this question mark which shows that it's a question. Do you really know Robert Downey Jr.? Now the junior, the JR dot, is an abbreviation. And so we have the dot and the question mark because the last word is an abbreviation. Is my operation really scheduled for 4 a.m.? Again, with an abbreviation, we have the abbreviation with the full stop and the question mark. There is a lesson on tag questions, so please feel free to refer to that for more details. So as a statement, this is not a tag question. Or, this is a tag question, isn't it? And because it's a tag question, the isn't it part makes it is the tag and makes it a question, so we have a question mark at the end. Now with indirect questions, we don't need a question mark at the end, as we'll see. What would you like to eat this evening? Is the direct question with a question mark. But if you were to say as an indirect way, I was wondering what you would like to eat this evening, this doesn't have a question mark because it's an indirect question. It's actually a statement, I was wondering something. So it doesn't need a question mark. Or, as a direct question, what do you think the next Game of Thrones series will be like? I'm curious what the next Game of Thrones series will be like. It's an indirect question. I'm curious about something. We can use question marks in combinations with other question marks and exclamation marks. And we do this in informal writing only. Please don't do it in formal writing. It's not used there. Are you talking to me? It's not just like, are you talking to me? It's got lots of question marks. So it's really like, are you talking to me? She said, what? I was like, I can't believe what she said. Oh my God. Who does he think he is? Now this last sentence or example is really, don't do this in formal writing, okay? Not in an application letter to join a company or anything. You can use this when you're texting your friends or on social media, but please don't do it in formal writing. And we need to be careful when formatting titles that have question marks in the title. So books and film titles and so on are often italicized to show this. And the italicized is when it sort of slopes to the side as shown in this sentence. And the rule is if the name of the book or film includes a question mark, then this also gets italicized. But if the name doesn't have a question mark, then the question mark goes back to normal. For example, how many times have you seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit this year? Now the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit has a question mark in the title, and we see here that the question mark is included in the italicized part. But if we have the film Groundhog Day that doesn't have any question mark in the title, we would say, did you enjoy watching Groundhog Day? And the question mark is back to normal, it's not italicized. This lesson is on quotation marks. These are used to reproduce exactly what somebody said. There are capitalization and punctuation rules that we need to be aware of. There are also differences in UK and US. The quote can be a single word, a phrase, or even a whole sentence. And the quote can be single or double quotation marks, as shown here. And both are used in nested quotes. It can be used to highlight a specific part of a question. And it can also be used sarcastically or ironically. Quotation marks are also used with titles of films, books, and other creative works. And lastly, they are used as a short form for feet and inches. And we'll see examples of all of these now. There are capitalization and punctuation rules that we need to be aware of. As we see here, she told me breakfast is ready. Now, the narrator part, she told me, and the direct quote, in quotation marks, breakfast is ready, are always separated by a comma, and the part in the quotation marks starts with a capital letter, as if it was a new sentence. Another example, Bob told me, comma, quotation marks start with a capital letter, you will get your book back tomorrow. You can also swap the quote and the narrator part around. Breakfast is ready, she told me. Again, they're separated by a comma, but in this case, the start of the narrator part doesn't get capitalized. So there's a small s in she. And similarly, you will get your book back tomorrow, he told me. So you will get your book has a capital Y as the start of the quote, separated by a comma, but then he told me with a lowercase h. When we use quotation marks with exclamation marks and question marks, we also have to be aware of what's going on. So if a question is being quoted, then the question mark goes inside the quotation marks. And the same applies with exclamation marks. She asked me, when do you want breakfast? So the quote is, when do you want breakfast, which is a question, and therefore the question mark goes inside the quotation marks. And a similar example with an exclamation mark, I can't believe you actually said that, Steve told me. So the thing being quoted is the emphasized thing, and that's why the exclamation mark goes inside the quotes. But if the narrator is asking the question, then the question mark goes outside the quotation marks. Did the boss really say, you're totally incompetent? So the quote is the boss saying, you're totally incompetent. But the narrator is asking if he really said it, so the question mark does not belong inside the quotation marks. And another example for an exclamation mark, I'm amazed that her mum said yes. Now the mum just said yes, but the amazement and the exclamation mark is outside of the quote. We do have differences between UK and US versions. So in the UK, the full stop goes after the quotation mark. And then the US, the period, which is what they call the full stop, goes inside the quotation mark. So a UK version would be, she told me I will be home late this evening. And the full stop is at the end of the sentence after the quotation marks. So the UK version looks like this. She told me I will be home late this evening, with the full stop right at the very end, outside the quotation marks. And in the US, they write it slightly different. She told me I will be home late this evening, but the full stop goes inside the quotation marks. Or another version, another example, UK would say I told her that dress is very pretty with a full stop at the end, and the US version of the same sentence has the full stop just inside the quotation marks. Quotation marks are used to reproduce exactly what somebody said. Breakfast is ready, she told me. So those are the exact words she said. Breakfast is ready. No other variation, no other order, no other words. Bob said to me, I will bring your book back tomorrow, I promise. But when we use reported speech, we don't use quotation marks. So the reported version of the first example, she told me that breakfast was ready. And for the second one, Bob promised that he would bring my book back tomorrow. So these are reported sentences and they don't have quotation marks. The thing being quoted can be a single word, a phrase, or even a whole sentence. Example of a single word, the hospital spokesman described her condition as satisfactory. Or as a phrase, he said that this was neither the time nor the place for such a discussion. Or as a whole sentence, John said, I hate working here. If we're quoting a multi-paragraph text, then the quotes are slightly different. And the rule is that each paragraph gets a starting quotation mark, but only the last paragraph gets the closing quotation mark. I'll try and show that here without too much text. Peter said, today is the start of a wonderful journey, and he carries on talking. The second paragraph contains a lot more information, and you'll see at the end of these there's no closing quotation marks. The third paragraph expands upon all of this, and finally I summarize the main points of the speech, and there is the last paragraph that gets the closing quotation mark. I hope that makes it clear. We can either use single or double quotation marks. And it really doesn't matter which one you use. Personally, I tend to use single quotes for words and short phrases and double quotes for longer phrases and complete sentences. That's just me. So, for example, the hospital spokesman described her condition as satisfactory. One word, I just use single quotes. Or as a whole sentence, John said, I hate working here. However, when we have nested quotes, we have to use both. So if there's a quote within a quote, we have to use different quotation marks to separate the two quotes. I'll show you what we mean with an example. We usually use single quotes, however, for the inner quotation. But the important thing is to be consistent. So, John told me, the boss said, I need this by Friday. So the boss said as a quote, "I need this by Friday," and John is telling me, the boss said I need this by Friday. So the inner quote from the boss is in single quotes and the outer quote is in double quotes. And we see at the end, after Friday, there's a single quote and a double quote. Or another example, Paul said, "The teacher told us the test will be on Tuesday." And again, the quote from the teacher, "The test will be on Tuesday," is in single quotes. The outer quote, "Paul said," is in double quotes. And we see at the end a single and a double quote to close the sentence. Quotation marks can also be used to highlight a specific part of a question. For example, the boss keeps saying that we must all make sacrifices. What does he mean by sacrifices? So we're really highlighting that word as being something that we're really interested in knowing. Or something that parents would say to their small children, "What part of 'stop that' don't you understand?" So again, we're highlighting the "stop that" in the question. We can also use quotation marks sarcastically or ironically. And you can use quotes to show the part of the sentence that you mean sarcastically. "I'm sure the politician will keep his promise." And in this case, you'll often see people sort of air quoting with their two fingers. "The teacher said the homework would be easy." It was so easy. In other words, it wasn't easy, it was difficult. We also use quotation marks with titles of films, books, and other creative works. And there are several options you can use here. You can put the title in quotes or italics. If you put the title in italics, you usually use quotation marks for individual parts of the complete item. And no matter which variation you choose, as ever, please be consistent. On December 31st, we always sing "Auld Lang Syne" in quotation marks. Or you can write it in italics like this. And if you want to show how you would use the quotation marks and italics together, you could say, "The track Natural Science on Russia's Permanent Waves is awesome," which it is. And they can also be used as a short form for feet and inches, which are imperial measurements that are still in use in England and the United States. So a single quotation mark means feet, and two quotation marks, a double quotation, means inches. So if you were to say he is 5 feet 9 inches tall, you say he is 5-9 double dash, as we can see there. And this particular representation is the only time in the US version that the full stop goes outside and after the question mark. This lesson is on commas. Now, commas are used to join elements of a sentence. And when reading, we insert a short pause for the comma, as I did just then. And there are differences between UK and US rules for comma use. Parts of the sentence that we join can be introductory parts, clauses, or list items. We also separate quoted and unquoted text. Commas are also used as a separator for large numbers. And they separate non-essential clauses from the main sentence. Commas are used in tag questions. And commas separate a direct address from the rest of the sentence. Commas are also used to write dates more clearly. And please note that the spelling is comma, C-O-M-M-A. A comma with one M is something completely different. There are differences between UK and US rules. In the UK, there is no comma before the and or at the end of a list. And in the US, there is a comma there. Now, there is a thing called the Oxford comma, which is a specialized version of this, so please see that section for more information. So, for example, in the UK, we would say the fruit bowl contained apples, comma, bananas and pears. In the US, they would write the fruit bowl contained apples, comma, bananas, comma, and pears. And commas are used to join elements of a sentence, and these can be introductory parts, clauses, or a list of items. So if we look at the introductory phrase or word, which sort of acts as like a scene setter. So we can say, trembling with fear, the children opened the cellar door. So this trembling with fear sort of sets the scene for how the children were before they opened the door. Or, one fine afternoon, they set off for a picnic. Again, setting the scene for them going on a picnic. And undeterred, they left work early. Again, explain a little bit what their frame of mind was when they left work. Suddenly, it started to snow. It was fine before. We didn't think it would snow, and suddenly it did. And commas are used to join clauses of a sentence. We had dinner, did the dishes, and went out dancing. Of course, you could, if you wanted to, make 3 sentences out of this. We had dinner, full stop. We did the dishes, full stop. We went out dancing, but this would be a very strange way of writing it, and it's much more natural to write it as we have here. Next year, I want to take my driving test, start a new job, and get married. So obviously, ambitious. Today, I washed the dishes, cleaned the house, and got dinner ready. We can join lists of items. And the items can be verbs, adverbs, nouns, or adjectives, and we'll look at an example of each. So for verbs, the acrobat jumped, twisted, turned, and tumbled, and commas between the individual items. Or for adverbs, go there quietly, quickly, and directly. Or for nouns, this recipe requires chicken, rice, peppers, and cream. And lastly, for adjectives, I'll have a pint of delicious, cool, tasty dark beer. And in each of these, the list item has been separated by commas, and you will have noticed we've used the UK version here without a comma before the and at the end. And commas separate quoted and unquoted text. And please see the lesson on quotation marks for more information. My doctor told me, I have good news for you. So the narrator is the my doctor told me, and the direct quote of the words the doctor said, I have good news for you, are separated by a comma. Or you can put the quote first. I have good news for you, comma, my doctor told me. And of course you can put the narrator part in the middle and split the quote. I have, comma, my doctor told me, comma, good news for you. All 3 are perfectly valid and are used all the time. And commas can be used as a separator for large numbers. As can be tricky, as in some languages, a comma is used as a decimal point, and the decimal point is used as a thousand separator, so please be careful if you are a native speaker of one of those languages. Now in English, we use the comma or a space to separate the thousands. So as in 1,234 or 6,378,134. Now you may be thinking, well, that's pretty trivial. Why do we need this? The numbers are quite small. But if we get something like this, it's quite useful to know how to split it up into thousands, millions, billions, trillions, etc. I won't speak that number. And commas also separate non-restrictive clauses from the main sentence. Now we know it's a non-restrictive clause or a non-essential clause because the information between the commas is additional. And if we were to leave this information out, the sentence would still make sense. So, my friend John plays drums in a band. Now if we left out the bit in the middle, it would read, my friend plays drums in a band, which is quite good. My brother, who lives in Rome, has 2 children. And if we left the part in the middle out between the commas, it would say, my brother has 2 children. Now here's the same sentence without the commas. My brother who lives in Rome has 2 children. And in this particular case, I could maybe have more than one brother. And I mean the one who lives in Rome, not the one who lives in Paris. And so in this case, the information is important to the context, and so there are no commas. And commas separate dependent and independent clauses. So if the sentence starts with an independent clause, no comma is needed. As in, since you're all here, comma, we might as well start. If we switch it around, we might as well start since you're all here, there's no comma. When Bob gets here, comma, we will make a move. And if we switch it around, we will make a move when Bob gets here. And commas are also used in tag questions. And they separate the statement part from the tag part. This is a tag question, isn't it? And this is a tag question is the statement part, and isn't it is the tag part, and they're separated by a comma, as we see. You'll be home on time, won't you? Again, you'll be home on time is a statement. Tag part, won't you? He hasn't booked his holiday yet, has he? In this case, the statement is a negative statement. He hasn't booked his holiday yet. And the tag is the positive component for that, has he? And again, separated by a comma. Dreadful weather today, isn't it? Again, the two separated by a comma. And commas separate a direct address from the rest of the sentence. Paul, get out of bed. So Paul is being directly addressed here. So Paul, comma, get out of bed. Or if the direct address is in the middle of the sentence, are you, Paul, ever going to get up? How are you feeling today, Susie? Again, Susie's being directly addressed with this question, so we separate it with a comma. But because it's at the end of the sentence, we don't have a second comma. The sentence is finished with a question mark. We don't have how are you feeling today, comma, Susie, comma, question mark. The second comma is not required. And commas are also used to write dates more clearly. And there are many, many different formats and ways you can write a date, and none is better than the other. So we'll have a look at some examples to show that you need a comma to separate numbers that are next to each other or words that are next to each other, but you don't use them for numbers and words next to each other. On March the 14th, 1879, Albert Einstein was born. So we have two commas here. On March the 14th, 1879, so we have two numbers next to each other, namely the 14 and the 1879. They are separated by a comma. And the second comma is because the on March the 14th, 1879 acts as an introductory phrase which is separated by a comma from the rest of the sentence. Or we can write Albert Einstein was born on March 14th, 1879. And again we have a comma between the 14 for the day and the year. Or if we write it like this, which is a more typically European format, the party was on Monday, January 7th, 2019. So between Monday and January, but they're both words, we have a comma. Between the 7 and the 2019, they're both numbers, there's a comma, but there isn't one between the January and the 7. Or if we write it this way, the party was on 7th January 2019. We have number, word, number, no commas needed at all. This lesson is on the Oxford comma. The so-called Oxford comma is the name given to the comma that is used before the and or just before the final item in a list. It is sometimes called a series comma or even serial comma. Apparently the name comes from its use at the Oxford University Press. Although it looks to be a UK-US difference, there are cases where it's used in English. If we look at the following sentences, the only difference seems to be the last comma. We invited the cats, Elvis and Lincoln. Or we invited the cats, Elvis, and Lincoln. But we need to ask the question, how many are invited? And this is where the Oxford comma makes a difference and is used in UK English. So with the Oxford comma, we invited the cats, Elvis, and Lincoln. And as we see, there are 4 people, things invited. 2 cats, Elvis, and Lincoln, making 4. However, without the Oxford comma, we invited the cats, Elvis, and Lincoln. There are only 2 people invited, namely the cats, one of which is called Elvis and the other which is called Lincoln. And this is the only real instance where in UK English you'll find a comma before the last and in a list. And this is the difference it makes. This lesson is on the semicolon. A semicolon looks like a full stop on top of a comma, as shown in brackets here. It signals a stronger break than a comma, but not as strong as a full stop. In other words, it's somewhere between a comma and a full stop. And they're used to split list items when the list items themselves contain commas. They're also used to list instructions and can be used to form compound sentences out of related clauses. Look at some examples. To split list items when the list item themselves contain commas. For example, addresses can often have commas in them, as in, I used to live in Denver, Colorado. So the town and the state are separated by a comma, as we see here. Now look at this sentence. Over the last 10 years, I've lived in Denver, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Washington, D.C. It's very confusing when we just use a comma, because some of the commas separate a town from a state and some commas separate the list items, and it's really not clear which is which. So this is what we do. We replace the commas that separate the list items with a semicolon and leave the comma that separate the town from the state. And this makes it much easier to read, and it makes the intent a lot clearer. So it still reads the same. Over the last 10 years, I've lived in Denver, Colorado, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Washington, D.C. But what we do is when we read it, we leave slightly longer pauses between the semicolons than we do between the commas. And then the intent and the meaning is a lot clearer. Or it can be used to list instructions. As in, your homework is as follows: task 1, semicolon, task 2, semicolon, task 3. Or we can list them vertically. There are a few tasks we need to complete before the next meeting, and then as listed in bullet points, task 1, task 2, and task 3. Or we can use semicolons to form compound sentences out of related clauses. So if we have two separate sentences, I hope the traffic is light, we don't want to be late for the meeting. Now these two separate short sentences are related. One hopes that there's not too much traffic, and the result of this is they won't be late for the meeting. So they are related. So one way of doing it is with a comma, is to say, I hope the traffic is light, comma, as we don't want to be late for the meeting. Or we can use a semicolon, and we don't need then the word as. We just say, I hope the traffic is light, we don't want to be late for the meeting. This lesson is on the colon. A colon looks like a full stop on top of another full stop, as shown here in brackets. And it generally introduces a list or series of items. It can also be used to combine two independent clauses if the second clause summarizes or clarifies the first. Don't worry, we will see examples on this. Colon also separates hours from minutes when writing the time, and also used to show ratios or proportions. Colons are also used after warnings, and they're used when replying or forwarding emails. And colons are used in dialogue scripts. And we do need to look at capitalization with colons. A colon generally introduces a list or series of items, as in, your homework is as follows, colon, and then task 1, 2, and 3. Or if we write it in a vertical bullet point list, there are a few tasks we need to complete before the next meeting, colon, and then the list of tasks. And it can be used to combine two independent clauses if the second clause summarizes or clarifies the first. It rained all day, I am soaked. And the colon is between the two because the being soaked kind of summarizes or clarifies the fact that it rained all day. Or you can say, I like all sorts of music, colon, rock, metal, jazz, classical, and again that clarifies. It's also a list. And the colon can replace words or phrases such as including or for example. So if we take the last example, we could have written it like this. I like all sorts of music, for example, metal, jazz, classical. And then we don't need a colon at all, but it is more wordy and takes up more space. And a colon separates hours from minutes when writing the time. But we don't actually say colon, we say, in this case, 10:15, or 10:15. Or here we say 21:30, or 9:30 in the evening. Or 7:55, being 5 minutes to 8. And colons show proportions, ratios and gambling odds. So older monitors had an aspect ratio of 4:3. And please note the way we say this, we don't say 4:3, we say 4:2:3. And we'll see this in other examples as well. The recipe has fat, sugar and flour proportions of 1:1:3, which means 1 part fat, 1 part sugar, 3 parts flour. Or an outsider won the race and the odds were 20:1. Colons are also used after warnings, as in warning, poisonous substance. You'll see these sort of on labels and things and signs. Caution, slippery when wet. Danger, deep water. And we often see colons as well in emails when either replying to a mail or forwarding one. And it doesn't really matter what format we use to show that it's a reply or a forward. We'll show a few here. So inquiry with reference number 123456. So that's a reply to that mail. Is a different one with RE with E small. FW for forward. Sometimes you see FWD for forward. And again, it doesn't really matter the format that is used or even the language that is used. You'll see this colon and then the original email subject title. And colons are also used in dialogue scripts. So Bob colon means Bob says, I was sick yesterday. Did I miss anything interesting? To which Susie replies, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. The meeting was boring. To which Paul says, yeah, you did the right thing staying away. And note in this particular case, there's no speech marks around what the people actually said because it's clear it's a dialogue script. We need to very quickly look at capitalization following a colon. Some people say that the word after the colon should be lowercase because the sentence hasn't finished. Others will say that it must be uppercase. And other people again will give you situations where you would use a lowercase in this situation and uppercase in this situation. Here's the thing. There are no hard and fast rules for this. It's really just preference and style. So if in doubt, if a company has a style guide, then use that. But above all, be consistent. This lesson is on the hyphen. Hyphens join 2 or more words together. This is often done to avoid confusion or ambiguity. And they do not have spaces around them. Hyphens are used when writing numbers. Also used when writing double-barreled surnames. And hyphens are used to show a range of values. And hyphens are also used to form compound adjectives. Let's look at some examples. When writing numbers, there are 24 pupils in the class, so 24 has a hyphen in it, and all the numbers between 21 and 99 do. 63% of the electorate voted against the incumbent. 22% voted for the incumbent, where the incumbent is the person who is currently in office. 135 people couldn't decide. In this example here, we only see the hyphen around the 35. There's none around the 100. It's only really between 21 and 99. and also for fractions. We don't need petrol. The tank is 3/4 full. And hyphens are important when joining two or more words together to avoid confusion or ambiguity. So let's look at this sentence as a really good example. We work 24-hour shifts. It's really not clear what's meant. What do they mean? Do they mean shifts of 24 hours? Do we work 24-hour shifts? Or do we work 24 one-hour shifts? It's really not clear, and we need hyphens here to clear up this uncertainty. Or in writing double-barreled surnames. So if the father is called, for example, John Brown, and the mother is called Susie Johnson, and they kept their names when they married, or didn't marry, then their child could be called Peter Johnson Brown. Or Brown Johnson, it doesn't matter which way around, it's purely a matter of taste. Hyphens are also used to show a range of values, as in, please refer to pages 88 to 92 for further details. And please note the way that we actually say it. Refer 88 to 92, not 88-88 hyphen. We actually say the word to. Or as in here, the office is open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We also use it in a similar way when giving results. As in, my team won the match 5-3. The board voted 6-3 to abandon the project. And hyphens are also used to form compound adjectives. And these can really be a combination of adjectives, nouns, and quantifiers. And it still ends up forming an adjective. And we'll see these in examples. Click the X on the top right corner to close the application. And the top right is a mixture of two adjectives to make another adjective. Or we can add an adjective and a noun to make part-time and full-time, as in, do you work part-time or full-time? We also even use a noun and a noun together to make an adjective, as in, it's a classic bricks and mortar house. So it's bricks and mortar is the adjective describing the type of house. Or we can use a quantifier and a noun to make an adjective, as in, do you have a 2-door or 4-door car? This lesson is on the dash. Dashes can be used in place of brackets, in place of commas, or in place of colons. But the use of the dashes is really considered to be informal. So if you're writing a formal text, you would use the brackets, the commas, and the colons. If you're writing informal text, you can replace them all with a dash, as we'll see. And in England and America, they have different rules about spacing. So if we want to replace a bracket with a dash, we do it like this. Our new neighbour, bracket, Fred Brown, close bracket, is a policeman, or our new neighbour, Fred Brown, is a policeman. So it doesn't really change the way we say it, it just changes the way we write it. You probably think she's friendly. She's not. Or with a dash. You probably think she's friendly. She's not. Or we can replace commas with it. My cousin, who lives in Manchester, is pregnant again. Or my cousin, who lives in Manchester, is pregnant again. And we're replacing the commas here with a dash. And again, Susie's mother, who is a critic of the school board, spoke up. Or we just replace the commas with a dash, and we end up with the same spoken sentence. Or dashes can replace colons. So with a colon, we would say a BLT sandwich only has 3 ingredients: bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Or we write it like this: a BLT sandwich only has 3 ingredients: bacon, lettuce, tomato. And again, it doesn't change the way we speak the sentence, it just changes the way we write it, changes the appearance of it. Or a very famous quote: only 2 things are certain in life, death and taxes. Or we replace the colon with a dash and we write it like this. The UK and US have different rules about spacing. So the UK writers put a space around the dash, and US writers don't. So the UK would write, "That's what I said to him, don't waste your money on that junk," and there's a space between or around the dash. In US, they wouldn't put the space around it, they just write it word on word. I personally don't like this because it makes confusing a dash and a hyphen too difficult. It's not easy to see at a glance, is that a dash or is that a hyphen? That's why I personally prefer to put a space around a dash so that it's clear it's not a hyphen. This punctuation lesson is all about the slash. Slashes, shown here in brackets, are sometimes called forward slashes. In order to avoid confusion with the backslash, again shown in brackets, which is really only used in computers. A slash is also technically known as a virgule. And they can be used in place of or be used in place of per when showing rates. They're also used to display dates, to display fractions, and to display abbreviated date ranges. And slashes are also used for certain common abbreviations. Let's look at some examples. Using a slash in place of or. Each applicant must include his or her CV. Or we can replace the or with a slash, as shown here. But when we say the sentence, we still say it the same, as in each applicant must include his or her CV. And please note there's no space around the slash, there's no blanks. Another example, your parent or guardian must sign the consent form. Or written like this, your parent or guardian must sign the consent form, but with a slash. Slash is also used to show rates and ratios in place of per. For example, the price is $20 per item. Or we write it, the price is $20 per item, but with a slash. And again, no space. It's just in a written abbreviation, we still say it the same. Or you can fit 25 blocks per square meter. Or in abbreviated form, you can fit 25 blocks per square meter, where the per is replaced with a slash and square meters is with an M with squared. We also use slashes to display dates. The meeting is scheduled for the 23rd of the 7th. Please note we would say the 23rd of the 7th, not 23/7. It's just a written abbreviation. Now in the UK, we say day, month, year, as in she was born on the 17th of the 3rd, 1992. But in the States, they say month, day, year as a format. So for the same information, they would say she's born on March the 17th, 1992. But what do we do with a sentence like this? 3/4/2018. How do we know to read this if we don't know the format? Is it the 3rd of April? Or is it March the 4th? We don't know. And in cases like this, we have to ask the author if we're unsure. And slashes are used to display fractions. So 1/2 is written as 1/2 or 1/2, and 3/4 is written as 3/4 or 3/4. For example, I'm nearly halfway through my book. Or, you ate 3/4 of the cake. And slashes are used to display abbreviated date ranges. So if the date range is greater than 2 years, we usually use a dash instead. For example, the 2008-2009 season was decided well before the last game. So here we're talking about 2008 and 2009, so we just write 2008/9, and then it's clear we're talking about those 2 years, or rather the 1 year season spanning those 2 years. They were at university together in the 1985-86 academic year. And if the academic year goes from September to August, it always spans 2 calendar years. Now we could in this case have written 85/6, but we chose to write 85/86 to make it a bit clearer. Now if they were together for a longer period of time, we would say they were at university together between 1985 to 89. Now, this is a greater than 2 year span, so we prefer a dash rather than a slash. A slash is also used for certain common abbreviations. It is, however, not recommended for use in formal writing. So what this means is, I haven't seen a black and white television for a long time. So television is abbreviated to TV, which is a common abbreviation. And then black and white has been abbreviated to B/W. And we would write it like this. Or please send the package to the company address C/O Paul Brown. Now in this case the C/O stands for care of, and you can write this on an envelope that you address to a company. Or the other common thing you might see is the shop is open 24/7. That means it never closes, and 24/7 here stands for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This lesson is on the apostrophe. The apostrophe, as shown here in brackets, is not the same as an open quotation mark. The apostrophe is used to show a contraction, and it's used to show possession. Its and its with and without an apostrophe needs to be explained. The apostrophe is used to show a contraction, as in, are you sure you've got holiday next week? Where you've is the contraction of you have. Now, there's several things to note here. Firstly, there's no space around it, as in you've, it's just like one word, even though you have is two words with a space. And secondly, it's not one apostrophe per letter that's been removed. It's just one apostrophe to show the place where a letter or some letters have been removed. Are you sure you're on holiday next week? Where your is the contraction of you are. Yes, I'm on holiday next week. I'm is a contraction of I am. Well, you'll have to work harder. Where you'll is a contraction of you will, or sometimes you shall. But no matter what the contraction is, there's always the apostrophe that is used to show the contraction. And these are very common in English. You'll find them all over the place. Apostrophe is also used to show possession. And there are a few specific situations we need to look at. The simple traditional way was to add apostrophe s to show possession. Unless the word ends in an s, then we just add the apostrophe. As in, that is Paul's comic, that is Thomas' comic. So Paul apostrophe s and Thomas, as it ends in an s, just an apostrophe. However, the modern way reflects the way we speak. And this only affects words ending in the letter S. So the letter S after the apostrophe is spoken more like a letter Z. So we would write like apostrophe S even though it ends with an S and say that is Thomas's comic. The bus's passengers are happy. Now there is a whole lesson in the noun section about possessive, so please refer to that for more information. But for this lesson, it's enough to know that the apostrophe is the punctuation mark that we use here. And now we look at its and its, with and without an apostrophe. So if an apostrophe shows a contraction and possession, how do we interpret its with an apostrophe? Could be both. In order to avoid confusion, there's an exception to the rule. Its with an apostrophe means it is, and its without an apostrophe refers to the possessive by definition. So a couple of examples. It's a lovely day today with an apostrophe where it's is a contraction of it is, or the dog is enjoying its bone where it then refers to the possessive. And this is by definition. There are no exceptions to this exception. This lesson is all about brackets. There are several different types of brackets we need to look at. There are round brackets or parentheses, as shown here, square brackets, which look slightly different, and curly brackets or braces, which look different again. And formal writing rarely uses any of these. We have to be careful with punctuation. So parentheses are used to separate additional information from the main part of the sentence. And removal of the parentheses cannot change the main information. So it's additional, often unimportant details that are in bracket or parentheses. And also when we remove the parentheses, the sentence must still be grammatically correct, and this is important. And the text in the parentheses can be anything from whole sentences to phrases, single words, or even single punctuation marks. And we'll see examples of these. Removal of the parentheses cannot change the main information. So in this example, our German neighbours made Schwarzwaldtorte, or Black Forest Gatto. It was delicious. And here, the information in brackets is just the translation of Schwarzwaldtorte. And it is delicious. So if we remove it, we get our German neighbours made Schwarzwaldtorte. It was delicious. Or someone might say, I'm so stupid. No, really. I don't know what I was thinking. And here the information in brackets just emphasizes the fact that someone feels stupid. So when we remove it, we get, I'm so stupid, I don't know what I was thinking. Again, the main sense hasn't changed. And also importantly, when the parentheses are removed, the remaining sentence must still be grammatically correct. So here's a sentence. I bought beer, bananas, crisps, and chocolate for our picnic, which sounds sort of okay. But if we remove the parentheses, we end up with a bad sentence, which is, I bought beer, bananas, crisps for our picnic. So something is wrong. What we have to do is change the original to be, I bought beer, bananas, and crisps, and chocolate for our picnic. So when we then remove the parentheses, we're left with, I bought beer, bananas, and crisps for our picnic, which is a correct sentence. And the text in the parentheses can really be a wide range of things, from whole sentences and phrases down to dates, single words, or even punctuation marks. I was very ill after eating at that restaurant. I won't be going back again. There's a whole sentence in brackets. Or as a phrase, it hasn't stopped raining, 3 days and counting yet. The unemployment figures report, May 2018, showed a falling trend. The politician expressed regret, sure, when the affair came to light. On these little signs or marks after the sure is like raised eyebrows, so it's showing irony. Or as an exclamation mark with punctuation mark, he managed to eat 20 hot dogs yesterday, where the exclamation mark in brackets is emphasizing 20 as being a high number. And here we have a slightly different thing where a single parenthesis is used when listing items. So for instance, your tasks for today are, and then 1, task 1, 2, task 2, 3, task 3. And here we see just a single parenthesis on its own. And this is really the only case where a single parenthesis is used. All other examples have a pair of parentheses. And please note, one parenthesis, more parentheses. Look at square brackets now. Square brackets are used in censorship. They're also used in quotes to add information, and can be used in nested brackets to make things clear which comments go where. And they have one very specific use, namely when writing sick, when quoting someone. So here's how we use square brackets in censorship. They replace an offensive word, and usually in a transcript. The defendant told the court that the copper kicked him in the head. So obviously used some bad words, and these have been replaced with expletive deleted, or sometimes they omit the deleted and just write expletive. That's in the written form. Obviously when we say it, we beep it out. Or she told the reporters My brother's alright, but he's still my brother. Or they're used within quotes to add information. And we should be aware that the extra information is being supplied by the author, not the person being quoted. So Paul said, the teacher sneezed 20 times. And in square brackets there's emphasis added, and you see the 20 times is bolded. So obviously when Paul said it, he didn't emphasize it like this, but the person reporting added the emphasis. Well, the teacher said they will leave school early tomorrow. That's what the teacher said. They will leave school early tomorrow. But the person reporting this had just added in square brackets that they refers to the children, to make it clearer for whoever's reading it. And again, she, the teacher, told us this would not happen every week. They were just clearing up who the person is. They can also be used in nested brackets to make things clearer and easier to read. I have a new job. My cousin got me a job at my aunt's, his mum's, firm. And here we see the comment is in brackets, my cousin got me a job at my aunt's firm. And because people weren't sure who my aunt was and my cousin, it's clearing up that my aunt is my cousin's mum. And so they put that in square brackets just to use a different type of bracket than the main comment. And they also indicate that a portion of text has been omitted to make reading easier. In this case, the omitted text is not deemed relevant to the report, and it just makes things a bit tighter. I know what you mean. After all, it was her decision. That's the main information, but in square brackets ... that shows that there's a longer portion of text that was added that was not deemed relevant to this information, so it's been abbreviated and cut out for the sake of brevity and clarity. And they have a specific sick use. Now this is used to indicate in a quotation that somebody made a mistake and that you're quoting verbatim. Right? You haven't corrected the quote. You're reporting it exactly as it was stated. Bob wrote, it's up to them. It's their money. It sounds okay, but when we actually look at it, they've used the wrong form of their. It should be THEIR. And so the person quoting what Bob wrote has written it exactly as he's done, and then after the wrong bit, he's added a sick to indicate that this was an original mistake in the quote. Or, Peter asked, why is the puppy chasing its tail? Again, it sounds okay, but it's used the wrong form of its. It's used the form that's a contraction of it is, with an apostrophe, and not the one without the apostrophe for possessive. So again, the sick has just been added to show that the mistake was in the original quote that hasn't been changed. Now, curly brackets are really not used in formal writing. They have some very specific use in maths to delimit sets, as in the set of fruit would be open curly brackets, apples, oranges, pears, bananas, close curly brackets. Also using computer programming languages to delineate scope. And some people do use them in informal text in place of other brackets. I think they do this just because it looks nicer. And as usual, we have to be careful with punctuation. So complete sentences in brackets have the full stop inside the brackets. Unless it's in the middle of the sentence, then we need no full stop. And we'll look at examples. The exam was 2 hours. it was barely enough time. So here the comment in brackets is at the end. The exam was 2 hours, full stop, open bracket, new sentence, capital I on it, was barely enough time, full stop, close bracket. Or in the middle, it's just a continuation of the sentence. So we'd have our English exam, that is my favourite subject, was 3 hours long. No full stop, no capital letter on that. Even though it's a full sentence, that is my favourite subject. And then phrases at the end of the sentence don't have the full stop inside. It's only full sentences. So we say, after the exam, we ordered a curry, nice and spicy. The full stop at the end of the sentence, not inside the closing bracket. And commas usually go outside the brackets. So on Monday, I hate Mondays, we had a chemistry test. So on Monday is the leading part. So on Monday, comma, we had a chemistry test. And the bit of information in the brackets is, I hate Mondays. But the comma goes outside. But if it's a question mark or an exclamation mark that belongs to the comment, then it stays inside the brackets, otherwise they go outside. On Monday, I hate Mondays, we had a chemistry test. And in this case, the I hate Mondays, the exclamation mark is just to emphasize it, and it's part of the comment, so it goes in the brackets. Or let's just change it from chemistry to physics. On Monday, who doesn't hate Mondays? We had a physics test. And here it's a question mark inside the comment. And the comment and the question mark belong together, so they're both inside the brackets. I hope that's clear. The last lesson in this punctuation section shows some fun examples. Here we have a light-hearted look at punctuation. Think of it as a reward for going through all that heavy section before. And we show how very small changes in punctuation can make huge changes in meaning. For example, a comma can really make a difference. I laugh at fools, like you. In other words, we are similar and we both laugh at fools. But if we miss out the comma, I laugh at fools like you, which means I laugh at fools and you're one of them. Big difference in meaning. Or let's eat, Granny. So here we're suggesting to Granny that we eat. If we miss out the comma, we get let's eat Granny, which is suggesting that we eat Granny. Poor Granny. Or if you have several plans and you separate the different things with a comma, as correctly shown here, my plans are watching Little Sister, shower, then off to the cinema. So there's 3 things I'm doing. Watching Little Sister, then I'm having a shower, then I'm off to the cinema. But if we miss out the commas, my plans are watching Little Sister shower, then off to the cinema. So it actually looks like your plan is watching your little sister shower, which is probably not what was meant. Or another interesting one, most of the time, travellers worry about their luggage, which I think is probably true these days. But if we miss out the comma, we end up with that most of the time travellers worry about their luggage. So we have time travellers. That's interesting. Or putting a colon in the wrong place can have a huge difference. Attention employees, toxic. So this is a warning to the employees about something poisonous. If we get the colon in the wrong place, we get attention, employees toxic, which is warning people that the employees are poisonous. Oops. Or a similar one, caution pedestrians, slippery when wet. So this is warning the pedestrians to be careful where they're walking when it's wet, it could be slippery. If we get the colon in the wrong place, caution, pedestrians slippery when wet. So this is a warning that when the pedestrians are wet, they get slippery. That's just silly. And you also need the right number of full stops. So here, for instance, love people, cook them tasty food. So this is saying, be nice to people, cook them some tasty food. It's a nice thing to do. If we get a full stop in the wrong place, love people, cook them tasty food. That's sort of cannibalism, isn't it? Or we are hiring new fish recipes. So 2 pieces of information. The first is we are hiring. Are you looking for more staff? And the additional information is, we have some new fish recipes as well. If we forget the full stop, we are hiring new fish recipes, which doesn't make sense at all. Or as a warning sign on the road, slow, children at play. So it's telling drivers to slow down. There are children playing, and one might run into the street, so be careful. Or if we get the full stops wrong, slow children at play. Doesn't sound as good, does it? Now, all those examples we've just seen are real examples. They're not made up. Now, this one is slightly made up, but it's still good. So a class was asked to punctuate the following sentence. And I'll read it very evenly. A woman without her man is nothing. All the boys wrote, a woman without her man is nothing. And all the girls wrote, a woman without her man is nothing. Punctuation matters. And lastly, a great definition of grammar and of course punctuation. It's the difference between knowing your shit and knowing your shit. And you now know enough grammar to take that one apart yourselves. Hello, and welcome to this section on conditionals. Now, conditional sentences are fairly commonly used in English, and they all have the same format, which is namely if clause, comma, result. And all of these conditionals, you can switch them around to say result if clause. Now, there are 5 types of conditionals we'll look at here. The so-called zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, third conditional, and mixed conditional. In case you're wondering, after 1, 2, and 3, surely 4 has to come next. The mixed conditional has this name due to the fact that it takes the if clause from the second conditional with the results of the third, or the other way round. So there's two versions of the mixed conditional. Now you'll sometimes see conditional 1, 2, and 3 referred to as type 1, 2, and 3. So if you're looking around for additional resources, don't let that confuse you. The layout and structure of each lesson is the same here. We'll look at when to use the particular conditional. We'll look at how it's formed and which tenses and aspects are used. And we'll have plenty of examples. Now, just as a word of warning, this section is based on previous sections, namely the verb section and particularly the tenses and aspects section. So if you're looking through the lessons here and you're wondering what's this present perfect or past perfect continuous they're talking about, please go back and check those sections out and all will be clear. In this lecture, we look at the zero conditional, we look at when to use it, how it is formed, and we give some examples. We use the zero conditional to make true, factual, or even scientific statements about the real world, or to give simple instructions. The zero conditional has the following format: if plus simple present, then simple present. If this happens, then this happens. And because we're talking about truths and statements that are universally valid, we can swap the if with a when, and the meaning is still correct. And as with all conditionals, the two conditions or the clauses can be swapped around without changing the meaning, but please pay attention to pronouns and punctuation. So to make factual statements: if you heat ice, it melts. Or when you heat ice, it melts. This is always true. You heat ice, it will melt. That's just a statement of fact. Similarly, if people eat too much, they get fat. Just the way it is. The last example here: if you mix blue and yellow, you get green. And this will always happen. This isn't subject to any other conditions. The other way we use the zero conditional is to give instructions. For example, if Bob calls, tell him I'll call him back later. So, if he does, this is what you do. If he doesn't call, don't do anything. If you're not sure what to do, ask John. So he's the guy you ask if you're unsure. If you know what to do, carry on. And the last example here: if you want to drive with us, get here before 7. In other words, we're leaving at 7, so if you want to drive with us, you need to be before then. And that concludes this short lecture on the zero conditional. This lecture looked at the first conditional. We look at when to use it, how it is formed, and we give some examples. So we use the first conditional to refer to possible or probable conditions and their likely results, and they're often used to give promises or warnings. This is the format of the first conditional: if plus simple present, then simple future. So if this happens, this will happen. And as with all conditionals, the main and if clauses are not fixed and they can be swapped, but please pay attention to pronouns and punctuation. So some examples to make realistic predictions. If you drop the glass, it will break. Now this is fairly clear. Normally you drop a glass, it lands on the hard floor and shatters. If my team loses, I will be angry. Well, if my team loses, they might lose, they might win. But if they do lose, which seems an option, I won't be happy. And the last in this group: if it rains tomorrow, I will take an umbrella. Well, it's quite likely that it might rain tomorrow, and if it does, I'll take an umbrella with me. So to give promises or warnings: if you cook the meal, I'll wash the dishes. So that's sort of like a promise, you know. You do the work beforehand, I'll do the work afterwards. Or as a type of warning: if you don't pay the invoice, I'll take you to court. So it's quite likely that they won't pay the invoice, and if they don't pay it, then we'll go to court. And the last one, back to a sort of promise again: if you reduce the price by 10%, I'll buy the kitchen today. So they're saying, like, look, it's a bit expensive, take 10% off and I'll buy it now. And that concludes our short lecture on the first conditional. In this lecture, we'll look at the second conditional, we'll look at when to use it, how it's formed, and we give some examples. So we use the second conditional for unlikely or even impossible situations and their results. We use it to wish for different present and future, and also to give advice. The second conditional has the following format. If plus simple past, then present conditional or present continuous conditional. If this happened, this would happen, or if this happened, this would be happening. And as with all conditionals, the order is not fixed, so you can switch the if and main clause around and keep the same meaning. But please pay attention to pronouns and punctuation. So here are some examples of impossible or unlikely situations with a different present or future. If it wasn't raining, we would be playing outside. Well, the thing is, it is raining, and that's why we can't play outside. Or if I was president, I would give everyone tea. Well, I'm not president, and the chances of me being president are very unlikely to 0, and that's why everybody's not being given tea. And the last one in this group, if I had more time, I would do more sport. Well, the thing is, I don't have more time, and that's my excuse for not doing more sport. So the other way in which the second conditional is used is to give it advice. And there's a certain amount of overlap with the first one in terms of impossible situations, as we will see. For instance, if I were you, I would leave your job. Well, I can't be you. I mean, that's the impossible part here. And despite what some sometimes really bad films in the late 80s and the early 90s would have you believe, we can't swap. So it's really some advice saying, look, you really should leave your job. The second one is, I would lose some weight if I were you. Again, I can't be you, but it's suggesting you need to lose some weight. And the third one, perhaps a bit mean for the ladies. If I were you, I would change your hairdresser. It's like what's going on up there? Really, you need a new stylist. And please note here the use of if I were you instead of if I was you. You'll hear both, but if I were you is in this particular case the preferred version. And that concludes our lecture on the second conditional. This lecture looks at the third conditional. We look at when to use it, how it's used and formatted, and we give some examples. We use the third conditional for unlikely or impossible situations and their results, and these refer to past events that cannot be changed, and they're usually used to indicate regret or to give criticism. The third conditional has the following format. If plus past perfect, then present conditional or present continuous conditional. So if this had happened, this would have happened, or if this had happened, this would have been happening. And as with all conditionals, the if and the main clause are not fixed. They can be swapped around, paying attention to pronouns and punctuation. So some examples for expressing regret. If I had worked harder, I would have passed the exam. And the meaning here is, well, I didn't work harder, and that's why I didn't pass the exam. I would have baked a cake if I knew you were visiting. Well, I didn't know you were visiting, so I didn't bake a cake. And the last one of these group, if I had prepared better, I would have gotten that job. Well, I didn't prepare better, or didn't prepare well, and that's why I didn't get the job. The other use is for criticism, and here are some examples. If you had remembered to get petrol, we wouldn't have been late. Well, I didn't remember to get petrol. I forgot to get petrol. That's why we ran out, and that's why we were late. If you'd have played better, we would have won the match. Well, I didn't play very well, and that's why we lost the match. And the last example, if you hadn't eaten so much, you wouldn't be feeling sick. Well, unfortunately, I did eat too much, and that's why I'm now feeling sick. And that concludes the lecture on third conditionals. This lecture looks at mixed conditionals. We look at when to use them, the format of them, and we give some examples. We use the mixed conditionals in one of two ways. For either past unreal conditions and their effects in the present, or for unreal present conditions and their effects in the past. And in both cases, the past and present situation are the opposite of what really happened. So there's two main formats. If plus past perfect, then present conditional, or if this had happened, this would happen. Or if plus simple past, then perfect conditional. If this happened, this would have happened. And as with all conditionals, the order is not fixed, so you can switch the if and the main clause around, but please pay attention to pronouns and punctuation. So some examples of the first type. The unreal past and its effects in the present. If I had learned to ski, I could be on the slopes now. Well, the meaning here is, I didn't learn to ski, so I can't be on the slopes now. Second example. If I had won the lottery, I would be rich. This means I didn't win the lottery, so I'm not rich. The last of these examples. If I had learned a foreign language, I would have better job prospects. Well, this means that I didn't learn a foreign language, and that's why my job prospects are not very good. And the second type is for the unreal present and its effects in the past. If I spoke German, I could have translated that letter for you. Well, the meaning here is I don't speak German, and that's why I couldn't translate the letter for you. Second example. If I wasn't busy, I'd be happy to help. Unfortunately, I am busy, so I can't help you. Sorry. And the last example. If I could speak a foreign language, I would have had better job prospects. Well, the meaning here is, well, you see, I can't speak a foreign language, and that's why my job prospects weren't very good. And that concludes this lecture on mixed conditionals.
Wow, you've come this far. Congratulations. If you've stuck with me and Derek this far, you have a strong grasp of English grammar. You know all the fundamental rules, you know beginner rules, but you know a lot of advanced rules too. You know how to navigate your way through a sentence or through a statement. But I don't want us to stop right here. I want us to really take the principles you've learned and apply it in different ways. Specifically, I mean speaking. It's not enough to write a good letter, a good email, a good text. Those are important skills, certainly on your resume and cover letter. But it's even more important to use good grammar when speaking. So pay attention to this whole next section so that you can apply your English grammar skills when it comes to spoken communication.